Thank you, guys. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks so much to the Environmental Studies Department for inviting me here. This is such a good opportunity. My job is to do education and outreach on the Office of Sustainability. And you're my audience, and I don't always get to have such a big audience of undergraduate students. So this is perfect for the information I'm about to convey today. So I have a lot of slides, and I'm probably not going to get to them all. But what we're going to be talking about today, actually, before I start, I'm just going to mention that there's a course in sustainability that you can still sign up for right now. It's called Sustainability in Action. It's every Wednesday evening, and it's taught by the Sustainability Programs Director, Tina Woolston. Course number? 195-2. 195-2?
Definitely we can advance
freshmen can, yeah, definitely be in the class. It basically introduces you to the various career possibilities and career opportunities in sustainability, because there are so many careers within that field. So what we'll be talking about today, an overview of what sustainability is, a history of sustainability at Tufts, what we're doing currently, present day, with sustainability and climate change at Tufts, and then information, if we can get to it, about Tufts waste and recycling. So what is sustainability? If you've seen me present before, especially if you've taken engineering management, you've probably seen a lot of this presentation before. Sorry, but there is some new stuff. But I always start my presentations with a definition of sustainability. I use one that's really commonly used from a 1987 UN World Commission on Development and Environment report. It's also called the Brundtland Report. And they define sustainability as the ability to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Great definition. How do we continue operating Tufts today, but also make sure that we can do it 100 years from now in affording everyone the exact same opportunities? So when we talk about sustainability, a lot of people think about the environmental piece. You know, that is the biggest piece. We think about incorporating natural resources, ecosystems. However, sustainability is really made up of several interdependent factors, including economic considerations, such as distribution and allocation of resources, and the social dimension, including issues like equity, social justice, and poverty. And really, sustainability lies at the nexus of all three of these areas. You can't have a sustainable solution if it's only fulfilling environmental goals and it's not economically sustainable or socially sustainable. It just won't work as well. So what we do at the Office of Sustainability is we're a resource, catalyst, and advocate for more so environmental sustainability at Tufts. And we're often the bridge between people's ideas and their practical implementation on campus. So if you do have a good idea to get something started, we're often the first people you talk to roll with that. A great example, I'm sure a lot of you know this picture, is the blue and brown Pass It Down sale, which it was a sale back in like 2009 and earlier, but we reinstated it for the past 2 years, right when students move in early September, so we did it for the second year in a row. And so this started as a student's idea in 2016. Again, the eco-reps kind of were like, let's take all the stuff that students leave at move out and let's sell it back to students when they move in. Then we're diverting all of this stuff from the landfill, and you know, students don't have to now go to Target, Bed Bath & Beyond and purchase all this stuff. And it's been wildly successful. So it's being run by the Tufts Greenhouse each year, a sustainability specialty housing in Latin Way. There's a couple greenhouse members here today. So just a great example of ideas to action. So the Sustainability Office, we have 3 full-time staff members, myself included, and the Director of Sustainability. And our office is located at 550 Boston Avenue, just down the street on the 2nd floor. It's our temporary location for the next year before we'll move back into the center of campus again. So we're over by Semolina. And we do have a lot of student internships, a lot. We have like 12 student interns right now, so if you're ever interested in a job with us in the future. Just really quick, we sit under the Executive Vice President, Patricia Campbell, who sits under the President. So that's kind of cool leadership chart. Let me get a picture of that. So to start with some brief history, I'll try to go fast through this, of sustainability at Tufts. So back in 1990, the university created its first environmental policy, and that same year, Tufts president at the time, Jean Mayer, he convened a group of 22 other university presidents and chancellors at the Talwar, France campus to talk about environmental sustainability. And at that summit, they created a 10-point plan for incorporating sustainability and environmental literacy into university research, operations, teaching, and outreach. And that's called the Talwar Declaration. And since then, it's been signed by over 500 university presidents and chancellors across the world. So we really were out on the forefront with this in 1990. This is an article from the Daily about our environmental policy back then. I think it's in Anderson. It looks really similar to now. So 1999, the Tufts Climate Initiative was formed. It was grant funded, so it was funded by an outside foundation, not by Tufts. And it was focused on reducing carbon emissions at Tufts. That same year, Tufts agreed to the Kyoto Protocol to reduce emissions 7% below 1990 levels by 2012. And we were the first university to commit to the Kyoto Protocol, and we did meet that by 2012. And then we built on that in 2000. We agreed to another emissions goal through the New England and Canada region, which was to reduce emissions 10% below 2001 levels by 2020, and we're on track to that, and I'll get more to greenhouse gas emissions later. In 2001, the EcoReps program started. So I'm sure many of you know, many of your students here, that it's a peer-to-peer education program for sustainable living in the residence halls. It's key to having a culture of sustainability at Tufts. I see we have some EcoReps here, EcoReps assistant coordinator here today. So Tufts was, it's arguably the first university in the country to create an EcoReps program. Now it's at all, like tons of colleges around the country. I think Bowdoin College thinks they were first, but it's like both happened in 2001. 2006, the Tufts Climate Initiative kind of merged. It became the Tufts Office of Sustainability. It stopped being grant funded. It started being funded by the Tufts operating budget. So that's huge. Tufts started funding Sustainability Office here. And that same year, we built our first LEED certified building, Sophia Gordon Hall. And it's LEED Gold certified. That was a really big deal at the time in 2006. 2008, we expanded the dental school building in Chinatown on the Boston campus, expanded the top 5 floors. Those are LEED Silver certified. Also in 2008, we started our Eco Ambassadors program, which is a program we still run, and that trains staff and faculty at Tufts to be sustainability liaison within their offices to start sustainability projects in their offices. And they go on to often get their office green office certified. They might start composting in their office, things like that. So it's another great way to get into the culture of sustainability here. We won a Mass Recycles Award in 2012, a Green Award from the city of Medford that same year. And in 2012, President Monaco formed the Campus Sustainability Council, which I'll get to in a second. That council released a report in 2013, with recommendations. In 2014, we put solar panels on top of Dowling Hall. It's a 99 kilowatt solar array, 304 PV panels, producing around 125,000 kilowatt hours a year. It's like planting 78 trees annually for carbon emissions. And in 2015, CLIC, or 574 Boston Ave, this building was LEED Silver certified. The great thing about this building is it's an example of building reuse. They didn't have to knock down a building and construct something from scratch using virgin materials. So building reuse is very sustainable. That got them a lot of LEED points. There's also a rain garden in front of this building, which prevents, runoff and polluting the Mystic River, putting water back into the soil. Oh, I should mention there's an audio tour in the CLIC building. If you want to learn all about the LEED features, you can see it there. In 2016, Tufts signed onto a national climate commitment, which commits us to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. It also commits us to create a climate resiliency plan in the face of climate change. There are over 600 other colleges and universities in the US on this climate leadership commitment, so we're certainly not alone in this. This is a big field. It was really huge for us, for President Monaco to make that commitment. In 2017, we installed 3.8 megawatts of solar at the Cummings School on the Grafton campus, which is equal to around 40% of their electricity use. And that same year, last year, we joined the We Are Still In coalition. So when the US backed out of the Paris Climate Agreement last summer, 2017, we joined a group of more than 2,800 cities, states, corporations, universities, nonprofits that are committing to uphold the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. And the Science and Engineering Complex opened last year, became LEED Gold certified in early 2018. And I'll show in a second why it's so great and energy efficient. And then in 2018, the Central Energy Plant on Boston Avenue was finished construction and started powering our campus. So this Central Energy Plant is a cogeneration facility. It uses natural gas as a fuel, burns that to create electricity, which powers most of our buildings on campus, pretty much everything except like the wood frame houses. And then uses the waste heat from that process to provide steam to heat our buildings. It's also providing chilled water for air conditioning for some of our buildings too, just a handful of those buildings. That was why the quad was dug up this summer to extend that air conditioning. Another thing to mention about that, it's projected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 14% a year for the university. So when President Monaco joined the university in 2011, he indicated that sustainability would be a key strategic priority for his administration. He created the Campus Sustainability Council made of staff, faculty, and students. And those working groups they worked on waste, water use, and energy use and greenhouse gas emissions, meeting in 2012 and releasing a report with recommendations for the university in 2013. So some of the recurring themes from those working groups were responsibility and accountability, so that this direction on being sustainable should come from senior administrators and from the president, and we should include sustainability goals in job descriptions. Planning, so making sure that when they're starting up a project, the right people are talking so that it can be planned to be sustainable from the very beginning. Bringing in the Office of Sustainability early on in the planning process too. A good example of like something not going right is at 574 Boston Ave, there's these really fancy waste stations that have trash, and they have two types of recycling because we had dual stream recycling at the time. And they're really fancy, but a couple years later, we switched to single stream recycling. And so no one was talking there thinking, oh, we might not be dual stream recycling for another few years. But they had already purchased this really nice thing for the building. So that's the kind of communication. Data, so for buildings to kind of understand what their energy use data is and to be able to try to reduce that. Creating a culture of sustainability at Tufts, incorporating it into the academic framework. Focusing on labs and hospitals, there's such a large amount of waste produced in labs and hospitals and energy use and water use that it's a really good area to work on to reduce our impact. And then also campus as a learning lab. So how can student research tie directly into actually reducing our impacts as a university? So this is just a graph to show how energy efficient the SEC is. Speaking of labs, it's probably why we ended up focusing on that building after that report, that we could reduce energy use in a laboratory building. So the average lab building uses 370 thousand British thermal units per square foot. But the SEC in Robinson, we have way fewer BTUs of energy per square foot. So it's just less energy intense than the average lab building out there. It was built to be that way. So we're comparable to the Dartmouth Life Sciences building as well. For an example of campus as a living lab, we did create this Tufts project database after 2013. This is a place for students to put their sustainability class projects after the course is over, to upload them here, and for other students to peruse and see what students have worked on. And we're trying to integrate this with the Tisch digital library collection soon. So nowadays, the Campus Sustainability Council is called the Council for Sustainability of Campus Operations. And what this council does is they really provide leadership and oversight for a carbon neutrality plan for Tufts. They just hired a consulting company to produce a carbon neutrality plan for this campus. Should be released this winter. And the consulting company will study central versus distributed energy systems. It will make recommendations for the near term and the long term. And you'll actually hear about upcoming opportunities this semester for community engagement with that carbon neutrality plan. And another thing, the council recommends strategies in general to conserve energy and minimize our fossil fuel use. Such strategies could include metering buildings at Tufts for energy usage, renewable power generation, energy purchasing, like purchasing renewable energy even if it's off campus. Yeah, so these are the council members. It's a really long list. There's 17 people. They range from faculty that works on sustainability, people in facilities, the Director of Sustainability, Tina Woolston. These are some names you might be familiar with as students. Linda Abriola, Director of TIE, Patricia Campbell, Executive Vice President, James Glazer, Dean of Arts and Sciences, Professors Jonathan Kenny, Ann Rappaport, and then Director of Sustainability, Tina Woolston. So the council is thinking of their emissions reduction strategy with this triangle as a guide. I think it's a really simple way to sum it up. And it almost serves as like a reduce, reuse, recycle, only for energy. So starting at the top, what we're going to do first to reduce emissions is to avoid carbon-intensive activities. So some ways might be like flying less, like maybe we should fly to fewer conferences, have more conferences through WebEx, have better commuting options for people who work at Tufts, and avoiding building new buildings is a great way to save energy. The second is to improve energy efficiency. So, you know, improving the efficiency of boilers in our buildings, retro-commissioning buildings, improving insulation in buildings, upgrading more LED bulbs at Tufts, which we have done a lot already. And that basically reduces our demand for energy. So once we can really reduce, then we can start thinking about replacing fuels, going from fossil fuels to maybe something else, or renewable energy. Because why would you want to have to create, you know, a huge amount of renewable energy when maybe you could create less if we have a smaller energy diet? It'll be cheaper. And then in the end, it could be 2045. We still have some carbon emissions, but we really need to meet our goal. Some people still have to drive in from really far places. We still have to fly some places for studying abroad and conferences. So at that point, we purchase carbon offsets to get down to zero. So we reduce carbon emissions in other parts and other places to get our own carbon budget to zero. So it's a last resort, really. It's not our first option. So how are we going to finance these carbon reduction and sustainability projects? So this is what the council is thinking about. They have 3 kinds of projects that they're funding. So they have a green fund that was just created last school year. You might have heard of it. And this green fund is for anyone at Tufts, students, staff, and faculty, to come up with sustainability project ideas. And they don't have to save the university money. They could just be positive for sustainability, and propose them to this Green Fund Council and perhaps get funded up to, I think this year they have $30,000 total that they can spend on these projects. And so that doesn't mean you should apply with a $30,000 project necessarily, but they can spend up to that total on projects. They're actually using, we have a small sustainable investment fund at the university, and they're using the returns from that fund to finance this green fund. So there was a soft launch of the green fund this spring, and the projects they funded were water bottle refill stations at the dental school, which was proposed by a staff member, an eco-ambassador there, and starting up a student composting program on the Boston campus, which was proposed by a grad student in the Boston, and that's still up and running. So these are smaller projects, but they really get the community involved. This upcoming year, there will be an open application period, but we don't have the date yet, so stay tuned for that. So for a second tier of projects is small to medium capital projects, energy efficiency projects that have good payback. So an example is, this is Jaharis Hall. It's on the Boston campus. That's where the Friedman School is. And they did a project last year of energy efficiency that cost around $800,000. But with all the utility incentives and the energy savings, it will pay itself back in savings in 3 years. We actually have a revolving energy fund that facilities uses where they pay those savings back into the fund, and then they'll even pay an additional 20% of those annual energy savings. So we're growing this revolving energy fund so we can continue to do more energy saving projects. And then there's the larger projects, such as the central energy plant. These are major infrastructure projects, and they involve, how we finance these is through debt financing, basically loan or bond financing that we have to pay back. So we do keep track of how we're doing towards, with our sustainability progress each year. We have a campus progress report. You can find them all on the Sustainability Office's website. I do have a paper copy of the one released last year with me here today. And we'll be releasing one this fall or winter as well. I wanted to just take a quick look at the data on greenhouse gas emissions and waste at Tufts. I do a lot of this in my position as well, just because I really love data and they needed someone to do it. So I also do that in addition to outreach. This graph is a few years old. It's on greenhouse gas emissions. It doesn't include transportation, so it's just from energy. It's kind of interesting. There's a weird decrease around 2005 that we had in emissions. This is something I made from the past 8 years, which includes transportation. It includes all 3 scopes of greenhouse gas emissions. So energy, car travel, and a lot of other things, even like the cows that we have on the Grafton campus. And as you can see, nothing dramatic really has happened to our greenhouse gas emissions in the past 8 years, but interesting to look at. But this is what's interesting. So this is a greenhouse gas emissions graph from 2016 for Tufts for all campuses. So it shows that 75% of our greenhouse gas emissions comes from electricity and heating. And when you think about air conditioning, that's in electricity too. So that's the purple, the green, and the blue. The purple slice is the steam to heat the Boston campus buildings. The blue slice is the combustion on this campus and our old energy plant to heat these buildings. The green slice is the electricity that we are purchasing from the utility. We don't have to purchase electricity from the utility, really, for most of our buildings now, since we're producing our own electricity, which I heard there was like a power outage last week, but that came back really quick. So that's, it comes from building energy. There's some other slices that are significant. Commuting of students, staff, and faculty is 12% of our greenhouse gases, and then air travel from study abroad and staff and faculty flights for conferences is another 12%. These are estimates, but I did a lot in the calculations. I found out where every student studied abroad in 1 year, and I did estimates of round-trip flights from Boston to those places, and then was able to calculate the carbon emissions. This is a graph of our waste over time at Tufts. We have a goal to reduce waste by 3% per year on average from our 2013 report. So I placed like a green line to show what would be 3% reduction each year since 2013. We were meeting that as of last year. We were below that green line, which is really cool to see. And then to give you a pie chart of what comprises our waste by weight, so tonnage of weight, about half of our total waste by weight is trash, goes in the trash bin. A little over a quarter is recycling. And then compost is 20%. That includes, and this is for this campus, that includes all the compost from DeWick and Carmichael and other dining facilities here. So that comprises a huge part of our compost tonnage. Of course, there's other composting on this campus through offices, through the residence halls, and the eco-reps. And then we have a tiny amount of like batteries and clothing. So with that, I'm going to talk more about waste and recycling really quick. This is our standard waste station that we have in all of our buildings at Tufts. We try to make it standard, so it's really obvious what's trash and what's recycling. We labeled trash a couple of years ago as landfill. As a reminder, it's going somewhere. Recycling became single stream. About a year and a half ago, all recyclables go in one bin. Just if you could help me out, and if you ever see 2 bins not next to each other in a room, could you put them back together? Because people love to collect leaks from the ceiling with these bins and hold doors open. That's the other thing. So there's been some changes to recycling recently, so I just kind of want to go over the rules of what can go in recycling. You might have heard that China has stopped accepting the U.S.'s exports of recycling, and so that's kind of messed up the recycling market and made it so we have to be really strict about what goes in the recycling bin. If you're in doubt if something can be recycled, you should put it in the trash bin now. You really have to be positive that it can be recycled. So paper items, they can have staples in them, magazines, notebooks, folders, envelopes with plastic or metal on the envelope, that's okay. and breaking down cardboard boxes. Dirty paper plates, those cannot be recycled. Remember that today if you have a dirty paper plate. Cannot be recycled. We want no food or liquid in the recycling bin. Metal items include empty aluminum cans, aluminum foil, aluminum to-go containers, absolutely no food in it, wipe it out or rinse it out before recycling it. Otherwise, throw it away. I know that's sad. Glass includes empty glass bottles with the cap on and empty glass jars.
Can you explain the cap on?
Cap on, yeah. I'm just going to do some slides on the recycling facility in a second. Basically, I think things get crushed, and then a metal cap will end up falling off and will be sorted into the proper metal pile. But if it's too tiny, if something is tiny and goes in the recycling bin, it might not make it onto the conveyor belt. It might like fall off before then. So sticking things together is a good thing. The same goes for plastic bottles. So plastic, hard plastic items, empty plastic, to-go containers, absolutely no food, totally clean. Milk cartons, clean yogurt containers, empty plastic bottles, cap on, because it's the same plastic, so it'll be crushed all together. Empty plastic cups. We were warning people we weren't sure about cups this year. Plastic cups are okay, but they can't have a lid or straw. And any empty plastic container, your shampoo bottle, your laundry detergent, and just make sure it's empty and it's plastic, it's hard plastic. Yeah? It does change. We just found out in the past 2 days, and it hasn't got, so plastic cups are okay, but no lid, no straw, and then no hot coffee cups, which is so confusing. But really, just use a reusable water bottle and a reusable coffee mug, and you'll be okay. Yeah, we really need to get that info out. So when we talk about recycling plastic, a lot of people want to put plastic bags in recycling. A lot of people think that can be recycled. It cannot. Any sort of filmy plastic gets stuck in the conveyor belts at the recycling facility. So filmy plastics that have to be trashed include Ziploc bags, saran wrap, bubble wrap, packaging materials. We are starting, you can bring these kinds of like grocery bags, you can save them and bring them to the grocery store, that front part of the grocery store. Because there are special facilities that recycle that type of plastic, but it's not the single stream recycling facility. So some trash items to remember, anything else that wasn't included in recycling. K-cups, food wrappers, that's so common, tissues, styrofoam, paper towels, napkins, and food waste. I'll get to compost in a second. Yeah. Yep. I think I always forget to put that in because I'm always thinking about, I just forget about the home items for when I'm presenting to students. Recycling. It's empty metal items. Cans, like all cans, yeah. So hot coffee cups are now have to go in the trash, new rule. Plastic utensils as well. And as I said, lids and straws. Straws are not popular anymore anyway, so I'm really happy about that. That was a good summer. Just to sum it all up, recycling rules. Things have to be clean, empty, and dry to recycle. No foods or liquids, and no tanglers in recycling. Tanglers include plastic bags, electrical cords, garden hoses. People like to recycle anything, but those things get wrapped up in the system at the recycling facility. I do want to end shortly, but this is so common for students to know what to do with a pizza box. There's usually a greasy side of the pizza box and a clean side. Separate the two. We can do it today. And then you can put the greasy side in the landfill bin or in the compost bin, and the clean side in the recycling bin. We recycle a lot of other things at Tufts, clothing, electronics, batteries, ink cartridges, CFL bulbs, and we have an answer for where everything should go, and it's on our recycling website. You could just Google Tufts Recycling, and you would find the answer. We also have compost toters around campus. So basically, people living off campus can compost at their house or apartment and bring it to these compost toters, which are located on our Tufts Eco Map. Students obviously living in the residence halls can compost there, and offices bring their compost to those toters. A really quick review of composting includes food scraps, coffee grounds, tea bags, paper towels, and napkins. They don't even have to be brown paper towels and napkins. So I'm trying to see if there's anything. I do want to finish somewhat soon. Just a really quick look at where our recycling goes to a material recovery facility. I was there this summer. I took this picture. We actually have a lot of cool pictures on our sustainability blog. This is why you can't put plastic bags in there. It'll get tangled in that machinery. Basically, our trash goes to a transfer station in Roxbury, and then it mixed with other city trash, and from there it goes to about 3 different landfills and 2 waste-to-energy incinerators. But if we don't have enough space in those places, landfills in Massachusetts are getting very full. The trash company will drive it to like New Hampshire or Ohio landfills. So these are just some ideas I had for things you can do. And then our sustainability website has so many resources on everything I discussed today, so I encourage you to look there as well. Thank you.
Shoshana, for a great talk. So what this means is that we used to be 0 waste for this meeting. We composted everything. We put our utensils in the plastic bin, our plates in the compost, but now we cannot do any of that. So none of the things you use today are recyclable or compostable. So please, 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 if you come here every week, I stress to please bring your own utensils and water bottle. And with that, do you have any questions?
Hi, this question is inspired by my shock at the deforestation along Boston Avenue during August. And so I was wondering, is your office going to be involved in any way, and is the university going to be involved in any way in the design and construction of the extension of the Green Line in adjacent areas to campus?
As of right now, I don't know much about Green Line extension and our office's involvement. That's something I could ask the Director of Sustainability. I think where our office will be involved is in the outreach once it is online, and getting students, staff, and faculty, if possible, to commute via that, the Green Line, although it might not affect a ton of staff and faculty based on where they live. So I definitely see it with the outreach portion once it's online. The tree thing, I don't know what to say about that, but I guess you have to pay a price for more sustainability, but I have no idea what the next step is with the tree deforestation. But
to follow up on that, I did see that there is a group in Somerville that was also up in arms about all the deforestation that is going on. They are working, at least in Somerville. I don't know what is being done in Medford, but I was also very shocked to see that.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the MBTA did that. That was not Tufts at all. So it's all owned by the MBTA. So that was not Tufts cutting down those trees. It is incredibly, it's so much hotter for one thing. It's pretty incredible, the cooling effect of trees. So my question is actually about this green transportation you talked about. Our campus is getting increasingly long along Boston Avenue, and from 574 all the way to 200. And we've got students who are taking classes in the Click building, and they're doing labs, they're going on to the other part of the campus. What about bringing Lime bikes, and specifically trying to locate them at 574, trying to locate some here, trying to locate some at 200 Boston Ave? It'd be really nice to make this a biking throughway and making it biker friendly. What's happening there?
That's a great idea. Yeah, there's been some recent bike infrastructure improvements along Boston Ave the past year or so. Painted green bike lanes and continuing bike lanes down into the Medford part of Boston Ave by Danish Pastry House, bike sharrows. So I feel very safe biking along Boston Ave now, more than I did a year and a half ago. Lime bikes. So a drawback to Medford is Medford doesn't have blue bikes, the docking bike stations like Somerville does. It costs a lot of money for a city to get those dock stations like Somerville has. So Lime Bikes is currently talking to the city of Medford about signing a contract to be in Medford. We're in the loop. We have a student here today who's on TCU Senate who's working on this project. So we are hoping to jump on that bandwagon as well. There's a lot of legalities that we have to go through. But we hope once Medford is on with Lime Bikes, we can soon come right after. And there were like special locations that we had proposed. I believe 574 was one of them, and I definitely think 200 Boston Ave was another one, although we don't own that building. But yes, so we hopefully will be bringing dockless bikes to Tufts really soon.
Are there other questions?
My question relates to the recycling. The recycling regulations strike me as so Byzantine that they're virtually impossible for the average college student to remember, let alone adhere to. So what happens to recycling that's tainted by things that shouldn't be in there? And in light of that, do you see recycling here on campus as a virtually futile effort?
Wait, so sorry, can you repeat the end of the question?
So what happens to the recycling that is tainted by things that shouldn't be in it? And in light of the fact that it is so difficult to maintain, let's say, pure recycling, do you see recycling here on campus as a virtually futile effort?
Oh, okay. So no, I don't see it. I think like it's my job to do education and outreach to let people know, and then it's through social diffusion and you guys talking to your friends. You know, I do have hope. It's a hard battle, but I often walk around looking in recycling bins on this campus, and I don't think all hope is lost. I think we can do the education. We actually have a number of recycling interns, one of which is dedicated just to education and outreach. Another is dedicated to recycling communication, so we're trying to get it out. The first part was about where does it end up going? Was that the first part? Or? Oh, yeah. What happens if it's contaminated? Yeah, so if a bag is too contaminated, if a recycling bag is too contaminated, it won't end up being recycled. It's true. But they do expect about, I think, 10% contamination in recycling. So they do leave that in their calculations at the facility. So I have hope. I think it's going to get better. I think we're going to find other companies to take recycled material to purchase it in this country and to remanufacture it into things. China had kind of taken that, taken all the stuff, but now that we're left with it, we have to find a solution what to do with that stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned avoiding intense carbon activities like building new buildings. I was wondering if the Office of Sustainability had any input on how to address the housing issue for undergrad students, because I know a lot of times people recommend building a new dorm.
Well, it does seem like the good thing about this campus is there's not a lot of space. So there's not that many places where you could really build a new building. So I like the solution that they're employing, that they're using existing houses, wood frame houses, to house more students. I think that's a good idea. I also like that, what's the name of that greenhouse that they're creating with Professor John Durant? It's going to be a very sustainable house in the new, what's the new neighborhood called? Coho? Yeah. So that's great. So that's going to be a beacon of sustainability in student housing. I haven't heard of any plans to build like a new residence hall. It seems like they're trying to reuse those wood frames and move people. Some offices were in wood frame houses, and moving those offices, like me, into bigger buildings on campus.
Hi. As far as Tufts' initiative to go carbon neutral, if Tufts were to need to purchase offsets, what would that look like?
I don't think we'll be purchasing carbon offsets for at least 5 years, probably much longer. I'm not great at explaining the carbon offset market, but basically, you know, carbon reduction projects happen around the world and in the US as well. And the carbon market allows it so that somebody can do a project, like they can conserve a huge forest, know the amount of carbon that's sequestered by that forest, but then decide to put it on the carbon market so that like someone like Tufts could purchase that carbon reduction. So whoever owns that forest doesn't get the carbon credit, we get the carbon credit for it. We pay them money, they get money from us. That's how carbon offsets work. I have no idea what we would prioritize for carbon offsets, such as would it be forest conservation or agriculture or building projects. I'm not super sure on that. This also exists with the renewable energy certificate model where, for example, with our solar panels in Grafton, we actually did not retain the RECs, so we actually don't have the carbon credit for that solar project. So the utility company actually gets the carbon credit for that. It's a good example, if that makes sense. This is a really hard topic to understand.
Kind of in the same vein, I was just wondering if there's any flexibility or future plans in new energy building, because it is like obviously better methane than other fossil fuel options, but it would still be like not a carbon neutral building if there's flexibility in like that whole structure to turn it into eventually being a renewable energy source, or if it's kind of just like short term.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We just built a fossil fuel using energy source for the campus, but in 30 years we have to be we're trying to be carbon neutral in 30 years. Luckily, this has a really long lifespan, the cogeneration facility, but I think part of that carbon neutrality plan that's going to be released this year is probably going to be recommendations for how we could switch that to not use a fossil fuel. And I don't know what that will be. It could be biomass. Middlebury College has a biomass plant where they basically burn sustainably harvested trees for energy with minimal pollution coming out. And maybe there will be another liquid renewable fuel that could be used. That's a great question.
Whether it's in energy reduction or, as we were talking about, solar and Grafton, or just kind of goals for 2030, 2050 or whatever, are you working with City of Somerville or City of Medford on their goals and, like Wine Bikes trying to figure those out? What's your relationship with cities?
Yeah, that's a good question too. We're definitely in touch with the offices of sustainability in Medford and in Somerville. We talked to them a lot about climate resiliency. Tina Wolfson, Sustainability Director, she's the one that's kind of working on climate resiliency at Tufts. I'm less involved, but we held a workshop on this campus in May and included those communities to talk about our plans for climate resiliency, because they're thinking about it too. It's super relevant. Mystic River is in Medford. Yeah, so that's one way we're talking to them, definitely about bikes. Somerville has worries, of course, that if we have to give our students Lime bikes, there's going to be more Lime bikes in Somerville. They don't really want them there because they have a contract with Blue Bikes. So, you know, we have to communicate with these communities, and we want to because they're our neighbors and we're in their communities. We're exactly 50% of our buildings are in Medford, 50% are in Somerville. It doesn't seem that way. People often think we're more in Medford, but there's a line that goes around the campus center that separates it. And as far as carbon goals, yeah, we chat about if they're including us in their greenhouse gas report. I've talked to them about that. I do think that they include us in there, which is kind of funny because we're also accounting for our own emissions. But they have similar goals. I think Somerville's is carbon neutrality by 2050 as well. Yeah.
If there are no more questions, there was an announcement back there.
Hello, my name is Jim Laurie. I work with a group called for a Livable Climate here in an area. And we are showing a film next Saturday. It's a documentary on the life of Lynn Margulis and the idea of that symbiosis is a big part of evolution. How many people have ever heard of Lynn Margulis? So there are a few. You know, if you did your AP biology, you probably heard of her. I'll just give a quote. She made a comment, life did not take over the globe by combat, but by networking. And most of us are better at networking than we are at combat. And humans could be part of that symbiosis. So anyway, it says here it's $5 for students. I think everybody here is a student if you sign up. If you show up at the door and you don't have $5, I wouldn't worry about it. It's going to be at the Harvard Geological Laboratories right next to the Natural History Museum. And I've got enough flyers for most of you. I'll pass them out. But if anybody is curious about that, we'd love to see you. So.
Thank you. So before we thank our speaker for today, I would like to ask you for a favor again this week. If you could take one chair and bring it back to the back room, that would be really helpful to us. And with that, thank you very much, Shoshana, for a great presentation.
Thank you.